At the end of last year, I checked out a little game called The Touryst from Shin'en Multimedia. It's an amazing little adventure, originally released for the Nintendo Switch. But now, The Touryst has arrived on 2 additional platforms, Xbox One and the PC. And to discuss this new conversion of the game, I am joined by my good friend and colleague, Richard Ledbetter.
Hello there, John. I've been playing a bit of this on the Xbox One X, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I didn't actually get the chance to play it on Switch, but I think I might well go back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I covered this late last year. It's a very interesting sort of free-form adventure game, focusing on a mix of platforming, puzzle solving, and the like, but it has this beautiful visual style with just gorgeous asset design, beautiful lighting, and of course a smooth 60 frames per second frame rate. But what's interesting here is that Shin'en has a long history of building games exclusively for Nintendo platforms, with the exception of 2 conversions of Nano Assault Neo X and Art of Balance for PlayStation 4. But now we have this new conversion, and according to Shin'en, this time, this was really sort of an exercise to help them learn DirectX 12 while also bringing the game to a new audience. And in that sense, I feel that they've done a really nice job here. There's a couple caveats we'll mention, but overall, this is a great conversion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a game that's essentially built for scalability, really, when you look at it. I mean, if you can run so well and so beautifully on Nintendo Switch, then just throwing exponentially more horsepower, and it should, really sort of tighten up the visuals and produce an even cleaner, crisper presentation.
Yes, absolutely, and that is the case here. So let's get through the details first here. Starting with resolution, of course. On Nintendo Switch, the game could run at 1080p or 720p in the best of cases, but they used sort of a dynamic resolution system with quite variable results and no anti-aliasing. But on Xbox One X, you get a full native 4K this time without any sort of dynamic resolution. So it is a fixed 4K. And of course, on the base Xbox One, that is dropped to 1080p. And in both cases, there is no anti-aliasing used, as this is a design decision by the development team, where they felt that using temporal anti-aliasing and other sort of newer methods blurred the image in a way that didn't quite work with this unique art style. So it's a very hard, sharp-looking game.
Okay.
But on the PC, you can push things a little bit further, and this is the more interesting version, I think, for me. So naturally, on PC, you can push the resolution up to whatever your monitor supports. So I played it at native 4K as well. And this version does offer anti-aliasing, but it is not like, again, it's not like TAA or anything. It's actual genuine super sampling, which means it renders internally at a much higher resolution and then downscales the image to the output resolution. So in this case, if you run at 4K on your output, the game is actually rendering internally at 8K.
So that's a 200% resolution multiplier on both axes.
That's correct. Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And as you might expect, that means that you just get this super tremendously sharp and clean image it's just about the best image quality you could ask for.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing. An 8K native game, effectively.
Exactly. And, with the Switch being its original target, performance is pretty good, but we'll talk about that later, of course. I guess the main thing here is that to reiterate the assets in this game, they sort of mapped them out using a program called Magica Voxel, and this sort of allowed them to generate these voxelized looking assets built out of 3D squares, volume pixels. That's voxels for you. And then they export these out and build the meshes that are then used in the game to do that. And because of this boxy like structure of the models, it's a perfect candidate for this kind of super high resolution super sampling, because there really isn't anything in the way of shader aliasing and various other shimmering that can occur with normal maps and the like. It's just perfect edges all around. It really kind of looks now like a little diorama that you're peering into, which I really like. It's a cool look.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really, because when we look at an Xbox or a PC port from a lower specification platform, typically we want, additional effects. We want extended draw distances. we want higher precision post-process pipelines. But this has no relevance, particularly to this particular game, right?
Exactly. But that doesn't mean there haven't been some improvements. Well, I guess there's been one improvement, which is shadow map resolution. So basically, both versions see an increase in shadow map resolution, plus the addition of shadow map anti-aliasing. According to the development team, the Xbox One X and PC versions support 4096 by 4096 shadow maps with 3 cascades, which is a significant increase over Switch. In fact, it's an increase by a factor of 4. For base Xbox One, though, this is reduced to 3584 by 3584, which reduces GPU usage by 30%, but still looks really good. Which means on all of these platforms here, the shadow quality is just much sharper than it was on Switch and perfectly aligns with the voxelized structure of the objects, giving it this super sharp, almost stencil shadow look.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I guess we should be talking about performance here, because on Switch we were looking at what was effectively a locked 60 frames per second. Well, I say effectively, it was locked. There was no deviation in target frame rate whatsoever, right? And that must surely extend to the Xbox versions.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's true. I think it was possible in the end to create very minor slowdown on Switch. I can't even remember if I was able to find it during my initial tests, but it's so rare. It's basically 99.9% locked, I'd say. And that seems to be the case on Xbox as well. We ran through a huge chunk of the game, I'd say most of the islands, actually, and it just kind of holds at a smooth, stable 60 frames per second, exactly as you'd want. And this is, it's a weird one. I've said this before, but when we get to games like this, it's not really that exciting to discuss from a frame rate perspective for us, right? I mean, the tools can show you the results here, but you just see that 60 FPS line. But I think it's really great to see games like this. They're typically from companies like Nintendo and Shin'en, actually, with their rich history of super high performance games across Nintendo platforms. And I guess now these other machines as well. So no problems at all on that side. But
right. Yeah, exactly. There was the but, which is that the PC version runs at 60 frames per second, but it doesn't seem to be able to run anything else. And more than that, there's issues with, let's say you've got a 144 hertz display. It actively forces you to switch to 60 hertz. Is that right?
So when it first launched, it would actually pop up that error that you're talking about like this, but it's since been patched. But it doesn't actually solve the problem. It'll let you run at any refresh rate of your choice, but it's still a 60 Hz game, which means it'll just appear somewhat juddery if you try to play at a higher refresh rate. It's not a match for it anymore, and it doesn't look great. And this is just down to the way the game was built for the Switch. And it would require some sort of re-architecting of the core functions of the game and a lot of the timings and various other things along the way. That they, I guess, just didn't have the time or budget to pull off for this version. And as a result, it is limited to 60 frames per second, which not a huge deal, I'd say, but still, it's always disappointing when you can't get high frame rate support on a PC game.
Yeah, I've got two sort of thoughts on this. The first one being that, I don't know, when a PC user buys a high refresh rate display, they really want support for all of their games, and the notion that you're not getting it here, it is a bit of a disappointment. But on the flip side, I guess it isn't a fast action esports experience, and the frame rate you do get is totally consistent, and it plays out just fine, plays out quite beautifully, in fact, at 60 frames per second. But, I don't know, I would have liked to see higher refresh rate support properly implemented.
You're right, and I guess the argument where it's okay is that in this game it has a relatively slow camera. The player speed and the way the camera moves around is not fast enough where a super high frame rate would be that useful. It's not like you're whipping the camera around with a mouse at a super high speed here.
Right.
And as a result, it looks very, very smooth at 60 hertz. And I suppose any benefits of going higher than that, while it would be noticeable, it wouldn't be significant. So kind of a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. But I will say at least that due to its Switch origins, the requirements seem extremely low. So you can run this on just about anything, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's very much a design that's built for, mobile technology. And here we are scaling it up to 2080 Ti, 8K resolution.
Exactly. But I guess some other nice things here is, just like the Switch version, there is, of course, no loading, which is awesome. The traveling between each island is instantaneous. You just hop in the boat, ride through a very short cutscene, and you immediately land on the next island, and you're controlling your character before the boat even finishes docking. It's just instant, which is excellent. And beyond that, I think you noticed this as well. The file size is absurdly small.
Yeah, it's like less than 550 megabytes.
You can really see the demo scene roots of these guys in action here, and this understanding of compression and keeping everything down, and they really did a great job there. Because, even it's a fairly simple game for sure, but it has a lot of high quality audio in it, really nicely recorded music, good variety in the visuals, but still it's very, very small, which makes it a very quick download, and it doesn't take a lot of space on your system, so it's one of those games you can kind of just leave installed and forget about it.
It's interesting though, because I saw the developer of the Falconeer talking about a similar issue on Twitter, which was that it looks like the install size on his game is going to be very, very small as well, and he's actually worried of kind of like a negative perception from gamers that they're not getting much content for their money, which is, definitely not the case on his game, and definitely not the case on this one.
Wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I can see that sort of mentality, but all you need to do is look back at some classic games that are quite long and the small file sizes, and hopefully understand that file size does not equal content necessarily.
Well, I think even Skyrim's only like 3.5 gigs.
Exactly.
That's how big it was when I first installed it.
So yeah, I mean, there isn't really that much to say, I suppose, other than just I felt that we wanted to highlight this since we mentioned this for the Switch last year, and I absolutely love playing it, and I've seen a lot of people asking how these versions were, and I am happy to say that Shin'en did a great job, just as expected.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, with their history of these super quick games, I really want to see what they have next. But I was playing this with Audie, and we kind of were discussing it, and it came to the mind that they've kind of made what could effectively be a Lego game, but that's better than any Lego game that's ever been made.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, it just has this sort of adventure-y feel that's really fun and engaging, and there's just a lot to see and do in there. It's not a long game, but it's a very engaging one, very charming, and I really love it. It's a great title.
Yeah, I'll tell you what sort of struck me about it is that the content that you produced for the Switch version, it's on 419,000 views now. And it says to me that, when something comes along that's a little bit different, that still looks really, really special, the audience will be there for it. And I hope that they will be there for the Touryst on PC and Xbox as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think this one's even on Game Pass. So if you have not played it, I do recommend checking it out, whether you're on PC or Xbox. And hopefully it comes to PlayStation 4 as well in the future. Or maybe, honestly, that would be something I'd like to see, is sort of maybe a PS5 release at launch with ray tracing features or something.
Yeah, native 8K, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Native 8K output, 8K 60 or 4K with ray tracing, something like that. Why not? I could be into that. This would actually be a great game for ray tracing features due to its relatively simplistic makeup. They could do some really cool effects with lighting and reflections and all that stuff.
Well, I look forward to seeing what they do with it.
Absolutely. But I think that's going to do it for this one. So thanks for joining me to chat about The Touryst.
No problem.
And as always, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to let us know by liking, subscribing, ringing that notification bell at the top for instant updates from Digital Foundry, and finding us over on Twitter. And until next time, this is John and Rich signing off.